I'm John Desouza, the X-Man, and I'm here at Empowered Light Expo. In my workshop, The Clear Hearers, I will illustrate and show the history of clear hearers. And also, I will give people methods that they can use themselves to access this greater voice that's available to everyone. That will be news that you can use in your personal life as well. Welcome everyone to Clear Hearers presentation and workshop 2. There is actually a workshop that's previous to this one, but it's more simplistic. It's more just at the surface of this material. Most of you are familiar with my material, familiar with who I am. However, I have an intro that says a little bit about me, and also my theme throughout all the work I ever do, ever, because I was an FBI agent for 25 years. And so one of my continuing themes always is, which is the main one that is used against us by the globalists all the time, is what is the true nature of evidence? What is the true nature of proof of things? Because controlling the truth, controlling what that we believe evidence is one of the main methodologies that the globalists use to manipulate and to control us by them telling us what reality is, and it's always contrary, and what proof is in any of these areas, what real proof actually is. So that's why this intro speaks to that as well.
Have you discovered Gaia.com yet? Stream the largest library of consciousness-expanding videos, ad-free and member-supported. See the links in the description below for more details and a special sign-up offer. Start your journey for only 99 cents.
Can you see?
A real investigator has to follow the clues no matter where they lead, and sometimes the place that leads can be very improbable and can be even non-physical. I did have a long career, 25 years, well over 25 years at the FBI as a special agent investigator. And the main difference between investigations I would do at the FBI and the ones I do now is that in the FBI, you were allowed to investigate something, and no matter how paranormal it turned out to be, it had to be ended with a physical investigative conclusion. So, for instance, we had the 9/11, the Indigo kids of 9/11, which turned out to be a bunch of little kids all over the country that in days before 9/11, they had prescient experiences of what was going to happen on 9/11 before it happened. And these kids were reported by caretakers, by school teachers, by school bus drivers, by, not by their parents, but by other people. And so FBI agents and cops with guns on had to go talk to these little kids, sometimes as young as 7 or 8 years old, who had these extraordinary experiences, these visions. And after all was said and done, every single one of those cases, we had to check to see if, maybe these kids heard something from adults, maybe they heard something from the family discussing terrorist acts, and we had to make sure that that was not the case. Every single one of those cases were found to be no connection to terrorism. But then, that was it. We weren't allowed to do anything more with those kids because the physical explanation, that was it. That was as far as we were allowed to go. We're missing out on the development of our abilities, of our supernatural abilities, because agencies like the FBI and other investigative agencies don't develop these things, don't go beyond the physical conclusion of these investigative conclusions in these cases to really explore the supernatural aspect of what is going on, we lose what we could have been. We lose our own abilities to develop ourselves, and it's too bad. That's why we need to work on this amongst ourselves in an independent way, so that people who use supernatural abilities to save lives, instead of being excoriated, burned at the stake, that they are rewarded and developed, and that we use their wisdom to help us develop ours. Physical evidence is very important, but unfortunately, people, their understanding of what evidence is and what proof is and all that has basically been ruined by television. People now believe that the only things that really are evidence are anything you can get in a test tube, you can put a DNA sample, like CSI, and that is absolutely not true. Evidence means anything that just makes a proposition more or less likely to be true, including non-physical things. The moment that you know that there's something supernatural in a case, that there's something genuinely and authentically non-physical, metaphysical, paranormal in a case, is when you've exhausted the physical explanations. And there's nothing in the physical explanations that account for what is happening. All paranormal phenomena is inherently unprovable by scientific standards. And that's just the nature of what it is. The medium will undo the message always, every single time. That's exactly why the scientific realm is exactly the wrong place to throw in paranormal phenomena. It's never going to work. It doesn't work because by their own standards, they are purely materialist. They can only follow material data and material-based data. That's all they can do. So it's just not going to work. That's why you have to have investigators.
Now that Joe Pepitone is here, it reminds me.
Follow your curiosity to Gaia.com.
It reminds me
unlock the entire library with a special startup offer. Click the link in the description to get started for only 99 cents.
Reminds me, please shout out your questions. Please, any objections, queries, burning questions, anything at all. I don't feel like it's practical to wait till the end to do questions. We'll do them then also. But please, anything that comes to mind, anything you see that you're just, hey, what is that really about? Please just shout them out. Raise your hand or shout them out, and we'll talk about them, because I do. Yes, young lady.
Question about when you're interviewing children. I mean, if I were there, I would have wanted to know, well, do you know who did this? Do you know who
Yes.
you seen people?
Yes. And we ask about that, and that's our whole purpose, because what happened after 9/11 was we set up these intel centers all over the country with FBI agents and police officers, and we told people, if you know anything at all, have any clues about who did 9/11, please call it into our intel centers. And so they did, and some of these people called in information about these little kids that knew exactly what was going to happen on 9/11. And they said, there's going to be burning buildings, there's going to be people jumping out of buildings on fire, and there's going to be planes. So, some little kids drew in class, they drew skyscrapers with planes flying into them, and they did that the day before 9/11 happened. So those kids got reported in because maybe their parents were terrorists that were planning the thing. At least that's the thinking. So that's why we did have to question those kids, and that's how that all came about. And I write about that in my book, The Power Investigators. That's where that comes from. Yes, young man.
So were you investigating before it actually happened?
No.
This all happened after the fact?
This all happened after 9/11 happened. It happened on what we call rapid start leads, which is what's used in intel emergency centers. These are all, this has nothing to do with people who've been under surveillance, nothing to do with the usual suspects that we are watching for terrorism. It was just little kids that had experiences that couldn't be explained in the physical world. That's all it was. And there were dozens and dozens of those cases all over the country. And in every single case came back, none of them were connected to terrorism at all, and neither were their families. So the paranormal answer was the only answer that there was. Yes, each and every one of them. And that's how we refer to those cases. The Indigo Kids of 9/11. Yeah. Yes, sir. Oh, good that you asked. Indigo Kids means nothing more than as simple as children who are born with crystal seed abilities. They're born with supernatural abilities and supernatural gifts. And we have some of them here that are now adults, but they know they had these abilities from the time they were children, right? Yeah, there's one there. There's another one over here. Here's another one over here. Yeah, and I have a theory. My theory is that we're all born as indigo children until the shit gets beaten out of us in public schools. And that could be by design. And most of us lose that indigo quality. Yes.
When you started talking about the 9/11 thing, something clicked for me. I noticed that they'd gotten rid of quite a few psychic police officers at my police department that year, right around January, February. They were getting
Your department had psychic police officers.
Not that they knew, but the ones I knew were psychic got targeted before 9/11.
Really? Targeted by who? Her psychic police officers that she knew got targeted before 9/11. I'm supposed to repeat your questions. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that are cops, that's one of the reasons you go in there, because you can use your abilities to help people. But I noticed some people got targeted for like stuff where they said they were injured on the job and they wanted to go back to work but wouldn't let them, and then let them come back like 3 years after 9/11.
Oh. And like how many, a lot of police officers got targeted that way before 9/11? Two, that's a lot.
In my department, they had 375 officers.
Wow. That's a lot.
And that's a lot.
Wow. That is,
It just clicked to me right now when you said that.
wow. That is,
And there's 2 people who have indigo children too.
wow. Anybody else? Indigo child? You, sir?
Yes, I've got several of them. They're all over the country and the world at this point. They're just, they went to homeschooling.
Ah, homeschooling, indigo kids.
And that stuff, and they were like woke from early on.
Wow.
They sure rocked their pants for them.
All right.
One lives in Sedona and it's like, oh my God.
Wow. That is great. Okay, guys, there's a secret to keeping indigo kids as indigos. Homeschooling. I didn't say it would be easy. Now, but let me tell you something about police officers and FBI agents. Most investigators are not true investigators. The majority, they're not. And that's because they bring their own filters to their work. There's all kinds of filters. Sometimes there's racial filters that they bring to work, and that's very destructive. But the worst filter is the scientific filter, where you believe everything is right until it violates scientific rule, or it doesn't follow the data correctly the way scientists would, and that's when their investigation stops. And that's the worst kind of filter that there can be. So the final phases of a true investigator, and these are things that we had to practice when we did psychic work, like the young lady said, in police departments or at the FBI, because we did have times when we had to rely on that, like during the Unabomber case, which I'll discuss later. And you have to use meditation, reaching out superconscious, use psychic ability, clairsentience, the ability to feel the past, present, or future physical and emotional states of others, and clairaudience. Now, these are not the first phases of a true investigator. True investigator is the phases are, you have to learn about investigation, knowledge, skills, experience. You become a real investigator. These are the final phases of a true investigator because you need these senses, these abilities to deal with someone like a serial killer or someone who is a practiced liar. You need clairaudience. Clairaudience is clear hearing, perception of a voice of authority that comes to help, uplift, and save us. This is the first time in history we've had a word for clear hearing in English, because clairaudience is actually a French word, clairaudient. And the reason it's a French word, all this work is based on my book, The Clear Hearers. It's available on sale out there for just a little while longer, just a little while longer. And it is the whole point of Clear Hearers is someone is trying to reach you. And the one that's trying to reach you is actually somebody very familiar to you. This is the first time we've had an English term for clear hearing, for clairaudience. And like I said, it's just individuals who perceive a clear voice of authority. And because I'm an amateur historian also, I have stories of historic figures that were themselves clear hearers. And I don't remember how the X-Files is connected to this part, but apparently it was in my mind when I was throwing this together. So for those who don't know, there was Socrates in the 4th century. Joan of Arc, most people know Joan of Arc was the first clear hearer. In France, Philip K. Dick, the most famous science fiction writer in the world, Philip K. Dick. And Howard Storm is probably one of the most famous near-death experiencers in history. And now, one of the things we do when we're opening up an FBI file is we look for commonalities among the suspects, the people. So this could be like an organizational chart with lines going from one person to another. And you look for those commonalities, and the commonalities in their experience in this case. This is Socrates. Socrates called his, the source of his great voice, he called it a daemon. Now, this is not a demon, because this was before Christianity. This was the 4th century. So he said a daemon was a descendant of the Titans and the demigods. And he says daemons run around with no physical body, but they have spiritual power. And he said his voice came from a daemon that would speak to him whenever he was about to make a crucial mistake, something that would take him off his life path, the life path that the universe had planned for him. And there's a representation of his daemon. It looks like an angel. Sometimes Socrates' daemon is portrayed as a demonic figure or as some kind of half creature, half man type creature. His daemon is there whispering to him. He was deciding whether he was going to go into politics. And he says that his daemon came to him and told him, do not go into politics, because he would become like the ruler of Athens, probably. He had a tremendous following in Athens, and people loved him. They absolutely loved him. One of the things you'll see in my books is that, and in any of my work, is that maybe because I was an attorney for so many years, I believe that the entire spiritual world, paranormal world, alternative realities, all functions according to laws, just like physical reality. It all functions according to laws. And I'm not creating these laws, I'm perceiving them and I'm seeing them. And here's one of the laws I see in operation in this area. The law of election correction. A spiritual law which states that when free choice leads us close to changing the universe's plan for us, the path that we're supposed to follow, the great voice will activate to correct that situation. It will affect a correction in our election, because the universe's path for us must be preserved. That's what happened to Socrates. And Socrates was told that he would find immortality and greatness by not going into politics and pursuing philosophy, which is what he did. And it looks like it came out a very poor result from our physical standpoint, because his daemon was descended from the gods, supposedly, but the politicians of Athens, they felt that he was a threat to their power, and he was, because he was extremely popular, much more popular than they were. And these are all his followers, and he was able to choose to be exiled from Athens, from the Western world. He decided instead to take the other punishment and to drink hemlock poison. And he did so. He did so gladly. And one of the things I believe that his daemon told him, that he should elect not to be exiled and to drink the poison, because it would give him and his work immortality forever. Yes, sir.
Did Socrates teach his pupils that poison is not effective and he's going to drink poison and he's going to live right through it? But that's the story I heard.
He heard that Socrates told his followers that the poison, he was going to drink it and it would not affect him and he would live right through it. And you know what? He did say that. But I believe he was speaking metaphorically, like what I just said, that he would achieve immortality in another way, which is why we're talking about him right now. I believe that's what he meant, you know. Here is Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc, figure from 14th century, 13th century in France. France, for those who don't know, France in the 13th century had been going through a 100-year war against their nemesis, England. And England had won that war. They had basically overrun France. 95% of France was gone. It was just like 5% remaining. And France was about to go out of existence. And we would never have heard of France today. The Yellow Jacket movement would never have existed, and nothing related to France would ever exist today if this had gone forward, because France was metaphorically hanging by a thread at this time. And then there was a young girl named Joan of Arc who was visited by something she called the voice of Mother Mary. She said it was the voice of Mother Mary, a female voice like her own. And, well, let's watch this.
A woman so extraordinary.
I had heard voices as clearly as I'm speaking to you now.
What have your voices said to you?
That my destiny lies elsewhere.
She is still an inspiration.
She is going to unite all of France behind me.
Joan of Arc.
You are so brave. You are capable of more possibilities than you even imagined.
She gave hope to a monarchy.
Your Majesty, you must have faith, and the people of France will follow.
And brought unity to a nation.
If she wears the part well, the troops might rally.
Strike the English hard and kill them to the man.
We are not on a mission of vengeance, Captain.
The important point to know about this is that this really happened, but if you were to write it in a fiction book, it would be, nobody would accept it. It would be, but it actually happened in real life. This was a 15-year-old girl who came forward at a time when, like I said, France, the European country France, was 95% conquered and out of existence. And one of the reasons was because the only French king left was also 15 years old. And nobody was following him or paying attention to him. And so they were pretty much ignoring him. And that's the guy they showed there with the crown. And so France had basically no way to survive, and the few remaining soldiers that they had really just like had basically nothing left to defend. So France was almost gone at this point, and it would have just disappeared, and it would have just become an English province, the entire country, which is what was happening. Here's another portrayal.
I was about 10 years old. I was taking a shortcut home through the forest when a strange wind began to blow. It was such a strange sound, almost like words calling me. Everything was moving so fast. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. God had given me a message to deliver.
What was the message?
He said that I must save France from her enemies and bring her back into the hands of God. Follow me!
She was on her white horse facing the whole English army, and she drove them away.
And Joan of Arc is the reason why all these terms are still French today. Clairaudience, clairvoyant, and all the other clairs. It's because all of these were created after Joan of Arc. And of course, she never actually said it was a voice of God. She always said it was a voice of Mother Mary and some other female saints sometimes. And of course, she led the French armies because they all believed that she was a holy creature, and they all followed her, and she was able to drive the English out of France, and the country was saved. There's history books written about this, and a lot of them are titled A Preposterous Story, because it's so unlikely that this could have happened. Law of magnification. The spiritual law which states that your superconscious voice will respond to your faith by speaking to you and rendering assistance that will protect, increase, and magnify you to a better existence. Also, magnification is one of the qualifying criteria for you to know that this is the great voice, that it's not something else. Because there are other things out there. There is a show that was based on my book, The Clear Hearers, that's out there right now. I encourage everyone, please see this show. It's called Manifests. It is by the executive producer is the guy who created Forrest Gump, the movie, and it's it's a tremendous show. It's on Monday nights on NBC. It is...
Completed the calling.
Yeah. Just not sure that's a good thing.
How could it not be? Thomas is safe.
You're harboring a fugitive in there. Do you?
And in this clip, they actually talk about one of the great things I talk about with the historical figures, that, we as humans, we see the results of the the voice coming forward and helping you, but we see a terrible result, like a bad result. Socrates drank poison. Joan of Arc was ultimately burned at the stake. And yet, the source of the great voice, and in the show Manifest, they switched from great voice to the calling. They used the calling. The source of the calling is something that is so far above human that they understand results differently than what we do. And that's the only answer I can come up with why these are not necessarily all negative results that happen from the calling.
Completed the calling.
Yeah. Just not sure that's a good thing.
How could it not be? Thomas is safe.
You're harboring a fugitive in there. Do you not realize we're being watched by the government, the media?
It's all worth it.
Is it? Because it sounds like the calling really screwed things up for Jared.
That was my fault. I got the calling wrong.
These callings are pulling you in deeper and deeper. And what if the voices are bad? You can't just follow them blindly.
I don't think we have a choice.
Sometimes the great voice gives us messages. I was talking with someone about this. These are short messages that it's difficult to decipher. And sometimes you need to sit down and figure them out, figure out what it means. And sometimes not that easy. Some people sit down and make up charts, trying to figure out what messages actually mean. And then suddenly it'll just come to you.
What do you want from me?
She was told something about an angel. And then she had to figure it out. Watch full episodes. NBC, Monday nights. Philip K. Dick is one of the only people, and like I said, he's the most famous science fiction writer who ever lived. Every single book that he ever wrote was made into movies, very famous movies. Even his short stories are made into movies and television shows. Anyway, he's a brilliant guy, and he's the only famous person who spoke about his great voice, his calling in public, and actually gave press conferences about it in public. And he had some incredible things to say. But for purposes of building the profile, the FBI profile that I was building, what I got out of it, his testimony here was his voice, the voice that came to him, the great voice that came to him, was not human. It controlled some decisions of his, where he decided to go left, and the great voice told him, no, go right. And it made small mistakes. Oh, shoot.
It was an invasion of my mind by a transcendently rational mind. It was almost as if I had been insane all my life, and suddenly I had become sane. No, I've actually thought of that as a possibility, that I actually have been psychotic until 1974, from 1928 when I was born until March of 1974. But I don't think that's the case. I mean, I may have been somewhat whacked out, and somewhat eccentric for years and years and years. But I wasn't all that crazy because I'd been given Rorschach tests and so on. This was a rational mind that was not a human rational mind. It was more like an artificial intelligence. Now, I don't pretend to know what it was. On Thursdays and Saturdays, I think it was God. On Tuesdays and Wednesdays, I think that it was extraterrestrials. Sometimes I think it was the Soviet Union, the Academy of Sciences, was trying out their psychotronic microwave telepathic I thought about that. I tried different theories, I mean, I tried every theory. I thought of the Rosicrucians, I thought of the Russians, I thought of extraterrestrials, I thought of God, I thought of Christ.
Was it something you heard then, or was it more than that? Just trying to the experience.
It invaded my mind and assumed control of my motor centers and did my acting and thinking for me.
But you had your own consciousness there as well.
Yeah, but I was a spectator to it.
Oh.
And first of all, it set about healing me physically, and my little 4-year-old boy, had a undiagnosed birth defect. And this mind, whose identity was totally obscure to me, I even thought it might have been Elijah, it might have been the Holy Spirit. I thought of everything. All I can say is I don't know. Was that it was equipped with tremendous technical knowledge, engineering knowledge, medical knowledge, cosmological knowledge, philosophical knowledge. The first thing that it informed me was to be very wary of heavy metals. And I've even thought that it was one of the great Illuminati of history, one of the great Rosicrucians, like it might have been Paracelsus. I thought for a long time that it might have been Paracelsus. I thought it might be a previous incarnation of myself that had broken through. It had memories. It had memories dating back over 2,000 years. It spoke Greek. It spoke Hebrew. It spoke Sanskrit. There wasn't anything that it didn't seem to know. It immediately set about putting my affairs in order. It fired my agent. It fired my publisher. It was very practical. It decided that the apartment had not been vacuumed adequately and not recently enough. It decided that I should stop drinking wine entirely because of the sediment, and it turned out I had abundance of uric acid in my system, and switched me to beer. It made elementary mistakes. It kept calling the dog he and the cat she, which annoyed my wife since I knew and she knew that the dog was a female and the cat was a male.
It made small mistakes, but it healed his little boy. His little boy had a congenital birth defect that was a great source of concern for Philip K. Dick, and yet this entity healed his son, healed his very young son of the birth defect. Law of divine non-interference. I always like to ask people if they believe that that entities have the ability to just walk into our bodies. A lot of you guys know what walk-in means. To walk into our bodies and just take over. And some people think, yeah, they do, because there's superior creatures, and we're, I guess, primitive creatures. What do you guys believe that walk-ins can happen at any time? Yes? Reiki Master was a walk-in. Gotcha. Yeah? Yes. That's the crucial question. So he did request it in a sense? You're very sharp that you knew that's the crucial question. Yes. Did he request the walk-in? Because this has to do with sovereignty. This has to do with control of your own soul. Because the law of divine non-interference, creator source or agents operating on behalf of creator source can never, or any superior entities, can never do anything that defeats a person's ability to choose freely. Outside entities can never invade or take control of our physical selves without our consent. Right? Yep, she knows. What were you going to?
So, like, what about demonic possession? In some way, that person brought that on, right?
Yes, I believe they did. She said, what about demonic possession? That means in some way that person brought that on. I believe they did in some way bring that on. Yeah, because if that wasn't the case, if this law was not a law, then what would be the case? None of us would be sitting here in our natural selves. You see, we'd all be occupied. We'd all be moved out. We'd all have walk-ins. We'd all have possessions. Because these creatures have those abilities. They're all out there. There's probably more of them than there are of us. And if that law was not in place, we'd all be occupied by these creatures. So yeah, there always has to be consent. There always has to be some kind of. That's one of the things when you're doing ghost hunting investigations, or even demonic possession investigation. What we call the first lie of the investigation is always when you go in there and you talk to the parents of the child. It's always nobody in this house did anything to invite some demonic possession or to invite this happening. Nobody did anything. Nobody participated in anything. And it's always a lie, because there's always something. And then later on, as you keep probing, you find out. You find out they had the Ouija board. The Ouija board was being operated every weekend, and and you had the old, or you find out something similar. Always, just about. So it's the same thing for channeling. We have many channelers here, and they know you always have to give your consent for these things to come in. So that's the law of divine non-interference. Outside entities can never invade or take control without our consent. How we know this? Because we're all sitting here in the natural. Howard Storm is one of the most famous near-death experiences in the world. He had a voice that first of all, he died. He really died in a hospital in France. And he was taken by these creatures out of the hospital room. He said he felt terrific. And he was taken out of the hospital room, and they led him down this tunnel, and they started becoming abusive towards him. They started hitting him. They started beating on him. And he heard a voice that came to him and told him, pray to God. And the voice, he said, the voice was my voice, but it wasn't me. And it commanded me, pray to God. But he was an atheist. He didn't know how to pray to God. He'd never had any religious leaning or praying, but the voice came back 3 times and yelled at him. And he said it came from his chest. It yelled at him, pray to God.
And we started to fight. I was trying to get away from them. They were pushing and pulling at me. And there are now a lot of them. What originally had been like a handful, now was, since it was darkness, hundreds or thousands. I have no idea. And they're playing with me. Clearly they could have just destroyed me if they wanted to. They didn't want to destroy me. What they wanted to do was they wanted to inflict pain on me, because they derived, pleasure isn't the right word, but they derived satisfaction out of the pain that I experienced. So what they were doing in the beginning part was, it's real hard for me to talk about, and I'm not going to tell you much about it, just a little bit, because it gets, it just gets too ugly. But initially they were like tearing and biting, tearing with their fingernails, scratching, gouging, ripping, and then biting. Trying to defend myself, trying to fight them off, trying to get away from them, but it's like being in a beehive. There's just hundreds of them all over me. And I eventually was just laying on the ground there, all ripped up, pain everywhere, inside, outside.
This was in the spirit, but a very physical experience.
Harder to bear than the physical pain was the emotional pain of what had just happened to me. The utter degradation that I just experienced. I never once felt that it was unjust or wrong. I heard my voice. It wasn't somebody else's voice. It wasn't the voice of God or anything. It was my voice. And I heard it speak, but I didn't speak it. So whether it's the voice of my conscience or I don't know what it was. It was just, but I distinctly heard my voice say, pray to God. And so I thought to myself, I don't believe in God. I pray to God. And I'm thinking, even if I could pray, I don't know how to pray anymore. I haven't prayed. And at that time, I probably hadn't prayed in 22, 23 years. And so I'm thinking, like, when I was a child and we said prayers in Sunday school and we said prayers in church, and what did we say? And I'm trying to think of it because to me, to pray was to recite something that I'd learned. That's what I thought a prayer was then. So
He said it was his voice, but it was not from me. That's what he said. So I go through all these patterns from these different historical figures. I match up characteristics of their experiences. And this is what I came up with. The identity of the great voice, identity of the calling, is you. This is from my book, Clear Hearers. It's in the middle of the book on page 145, in the perfect middle of the book, and it says the identity of the great voice is you. But it's too simplistic to say the higher self, because it's an unknowable, unfathomable, incomprehensible version of you, a version that humans cannot fully understand in this present incarnation. It is the version of you that stands in the breath of God. It is a cosmic reality. That's why it's difficult to really get your arms around. Clear hearing is, as Howard Storm said, it is usually not through the ears. It does not come through the ears. That's a normal voice that does that. And it is, Howard Storm's was from his chest. Joan of Arc received the voice from the sky above her. It is loud and clear. Now, these are common characteristics that gives us the identity of the phenomena, okay? There can be other phenomena, but we're talking about this one right now. Loud and clear, it is meant to be understood, like instructions. It is, in the show Manifest, they did a couple of episodes where they show sounds being made from the calling, just sounds, and I objected to those very much, because the whole point of the great voice, the whole point of the calling is to be understood, to communicate something very important. So music or heartbeat, it doesn't qualify under that. The great voice, all of these characters said, it was a similar voice to my own, but it was not from me. All of Joan of Arc said that also, and PKD, Philip K. Dick. Also, it was always to help or support or save you. However, it's not omniscient like God. It makes small mistakes, small misidentifications. Shoot, I'm behind here. Okay. Voice hearers. Does anyone know what voice hearers are? That it is something completely different and distinct from clear hearing. Voice hearers are the people who get medicated, who go to medication. Voice hearers just hear voices. And they do come through the ears. They often hear vague murmuring. This is not meant to communicate. Sometimes it's just meant to scare the listener. So voice hearing is something very, very different. In my book, The Clear Hearers, I have the foreword by Jason Quitt. Some of you may know who Jason Quitt is. He's a great shamanic teacher. Do you know who he is? Yeah, he has a lot of great books out, including Forbidden Knowledge. Yeah, Forbidden Knowledge. Yes, and he has the Egyptian postures as well. Anyway, he wrote the foreword to my book, and he's the perfect person to write it because he has been both a clear hearer and he's also been a voice hearer. When he was 15 years old, he was in an accident. He got sent to the hospital, and they gave him this terrible, codeine. They gave him codeine, this horrible medicine, and as soon as they gave it to him, he said a gateway opened up, and a bunch of these dark entities started murmuring at him, yelling, fighting, just murmuring stuff at him. And he got so frustrated, he started getting closer to them to try to hear what they were saying, to make sense of it. And he said the gateway got further every time he moved closer to them, even right through the physical wall of the hospital room. So he was contending with that all night. And in the morning, he told the doctors what happened, and they just wrote audiographic hallucination, something like that, due to codeine. Never give codeine ever again. And they put a warning on his chart, and that was it. But he's also been a clear hearer. He had an entity that came to him and spoke to him, and he received a message from it, and it actually healed him of a sickness that he had at one point as well. The still small voice is a different section of this. It's not really a voice at all, the still small voice. It's a prompting that we have. It's kind of small and far away. Sometimes you get it in the solar plexus, at the bottom of the solar plexus. And it's just kind of, sometimes it can be a voice, but it's usually a prompting that kind of gives you a sense what you should do. Should you go left? Should you go right? Everyone has access to their still small voice. It's always there. It's always trying to help you with what to do and what not to do. This has been planted in your solar plexus by creator force. There were people, here's an example, people listening to their still small voice during the 9/11 attacks. There's a famous actor, movie star, Mark Wahlberg. He doesn't like to talk about this experience, but he was one of the cancellations, last minute cancellations on the flights at 9/11 that all went down, the flights to Washington, D.C. and New York City that went down. He was supposed to be on one of those flights, and he showed up to the airport, and he said he just got a feeling in the pit of his stomach, a really sick feeling. And he just canceled, and he walked away from the flight. Yes, young lady. Yeah. She said, is there a voice that's supposed to tell someone something, but then we as a listener say, oh, that's stupid, I'm not going to listen to that. Yeah, those are all the people who got on the planes on 9/11 and rode on those planes. They all got the same message Mark Wahlberg got, but they ignored it. At least that's my theory. That's what I believe.
That's because you're trained to not trust your gut.
Mm.
And then I ask people that question all the time. The people who trust their gut make way better decisions.
He says some people are trained not to trust their gut instinct. And he says people who know to trust their gut instinct make much better decisions, and that's true.
Philip K. Dick, I just looked on Amazon, so two famous movies, Minority Report and Blade Runner.
Yeah, Philip K. Dick has about a dozen or more famous movies. He has many more than just those two, because
they stood out.
Yeah, Minority Report is a big one. That is true. Still small voice. This is from the Bible in Kings 1. Chapter 19, God is found not in the wind, nor in the earthquake, nor in the fire, but in a still small voice. And I believe that's because he's planted that in you. It's not because he's literally in that still small voice. I believe it's because he planted that in your, well, basically your solar plexus. Some people call it intuition, others say it's a guardian angel, but it is always speaking. Oh, this is a quote from my mother, Neela Desouza. She's the one I dedicated my book Clear Hearers to, and she was the first clear hearer that I knew. And she said it's always with us, it's planted by God. It is that still small voice in our hearts that whispers gently to us, gives us advice and suggestions, feelings about whether something is right, and then, like the young lady in the back said, and then is promptly ignored and put aside. But chances are, if you listen to the small voice, you won't need a visit from the big voice. And that is true. It's all connected.
Problem solved. Told you.
Oh, and this is the other thing about the still small voice is that, and this is something my mother taught me, the great voice can come to you and occupy the space of the still small voice. In other words, it can speak to you softly also, softly and far away, because it can utilize that mechanism from the still small voice, and that does happen also, like it happens here.
How's Jared?
Problem solved. Told you I'd take care of it. Wow.
Yeah, my head's spinning. I just needed to see it all clearly.
This was a lot of work for a guy who said this morning he wanted nothing to do with the plane, the passengers, the callings.
I tried to break away. But Cal brought me back.
Is he having callings?
He says he's not hearing voices, but he knows things he shouldn't, senses things before they happen. It's not like with us. He's different. I can't walk away now.
It's like a giant spider web.
And we're all trapped in it.
Connected. The parents are getting the great voice, the great voice, but the little kid is getting the still small voice, but it's all connected. Here's a strange and dangerous statistic, and we found this out. I hope nobody's going on a plane tonight. We found this out on 9/11. We found this out because it was the first time that so many planes went down at the same, commercial airliners went down at the same time. And an FAA official told the FBI, told us, something he would never repeat in public. It was that commercial airliners that crash have higher rates of passenger last-minute cancellations than planes that don't. Equals more empty seats on planes that are going to crash. Now, as an investigator and as a person who's been around a lot of bad cops in my time, it jumps out at me how many reasons this can never be publicized. Can somebody tell me, there's a lot of good investigators here too, can you tell me why we can't tell the public this at large, basically?
It brings panic, fear.
Yeah, it would create panic, it would create fear, and what else? What else would it literally do? Yes, sir.
Do you think it's they don't want us to know that our capabilities?
That's right. It would reveal how true our abilities really are. Yeah. And what else would it do? That's right. That's right. It would lead to liability for the airlines when these things happen. Also, when people, well, for one thing, it would mean that if you go on a plane that's going somewhere, far away, and you suddenly see a lot of empty seats on that plane, what are you going to do? You might just turn around. That's some liability for the airline right there. That's some liability. Another one, here's another one. If you've been around a lot of bad cops like I have, you'll know this is true. It also means that if you have a lot of cancellations on a flight, the police will start saying, well, maybe these guys canceled their flights because they were part of the act that brought that airliner down. So that's more liability for more people based on just bad investigation. And there's a lot of bad investigators out there, let me tell you. Oh, here's several of you mentioned, several people always mention this to me before this workshop. Voice of God technology. You guys know about that, right? Here's a lot of these technologies, like the technology that was used on 9/11, are in the hands of the globalist cabal, all right? I got Smarty in the back of the room. He knows all about this. He knows all about this. These technologies are in the hands of the global elite, the global cabal, and they use these technologies against us. And they're really happy when people point them in people get pointed in the wrong direction. Like 911 was an inside job. The federal government did 911. Well, federal government didn't do 911. That was technology that the United States does not have. That's what it was. Maybe they had some complicity. Maybe they stood down some security forces and things like that. But the actual act itself, that was breakaway technology that we don't have. Well, here's the thing about voice of God technology. Voice of God technology is right now in the hands of the nations. The nations actually have this technology. That's what makes it so dangerous. The United States, Russia, China, they have this technology right now. And it is hypersonic and scalar tech that allows them to beam apparent sound, voices, even music, directly into human skulls. This technology has been developed for use in psychological war operations. Very effective in deceiving the hearer. Counterfeit clairaudience will be used on a mass scale someday very soon. Yes, young lady, did you have? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think they have it. They have it right now. They have used it on several instances around the globe, where we had recently what was it? A Cuban embassy. A Cuban embassy that had to be evacuated because it was attacked with scalar sound, scalar sonics, and some other stuff. It was, and we've had it in other places too. Yes, sir.
How would you say you would discern then, because you've got this possible technology coming in?
That's right. That's right. That's right. That is the key question. How can you discern then this voice of God technology from clear hearing or something that is natural and normal?
Because of the way it feels.
That's right. It's because of the way, I love this audience. It's because of the way it feels. When you practice this, when you practice clairaudience, you practice listening to the great voice, and you start getting it, and you will get it. You will get it. Even if it comes in as a still small voice, you will receive it. You will get it. You will, and you'll learn how it feels. And when this voice of God technology comes in, it gets beamed to your skull. And that is not comfortable. That's why it's used for psychological warfare. That's how you're going to know the difference. That's how you'll discern. Yes, sir.
When they come up with this mandatory microchipping for everybody, like in the military or do you think that would make it more effective?
Yeah.
You actually feel like it's your voice.
Oh, yeah. When they come up with mandatory microchipping, will that make the technology feel more like your voice when they do use the voice of God technology? And yeah, it would.
But it would never resonate with the heart.
But it would never resonate with the heart. I want her up on stage with me. She's good. Yeah, it would never resonate with the heart, and that's what tells you that it's not real. It's not good or real.
Trauma, junk, do certain practices.
Yeah.
So you can get yourself to a level like of self-love, whatever, where that kind of stuff, you would be able to discern the difference.
I'm sorry, start over.
Sorry. So if you work on the self-love aspect, getting rid of all of your emotional trauma and doing like certain, I like EFT tapping, spiritual practices, then I think as time goes on, you will be able to discern between what's coming from your higher self, a higher voice, than this stuff. Like she said, you can feel it, but I also believe that certain people will not be able to tell the difference because of the level that they're on. And so that's why it's so important for us to get to that point. And right. Yeah, to get to the perfect left brain, right brain balance.
Say again?
Well, I'm just saying the MK Ultra, and these people, as far as I'm concerned, many of these false flags with these kids in the schools, they were all programmed. And I believe the Vatican, the same thing. How could these good people be, when you look around, the people are not doing such nice things. There's a lot of that, so it's all programming. We look at the Vatican, we look in the government, we look at Obama.
Did you hear about that one? He killed his brother with the sword. He knew that he was being targeted by the voice of God technology, and he was actually going forward and speaking about it. They wiped his whole Facebook page clean, but ultimately he ended up killing his brother.
It's a horrible thing, yeah. So getting emotionally balanced early on is certainly a key to it. If you can avoid that hard,
Actually, you could also use dowsing. If you like, I'm an avid dowser. I've been doing it for 3 years. I kind of know when it's my thoughts and when it's not my thoughts.
It's not something that I've ever.
Believe it or not, about 50% of your thoughts that come in your head are not from you. They come from spirit. And I get hunches all the time because I do a lot of Jason Quitt's Qigong, and I get a lot of hunches about past lives and situations. And I, from a child, have been able to go like in a trance state, and I can see things that other people can't see. But you could go to someone who is avid with dowsing and ask them the question, is this voice, from my spirit, my higher self? Is it from somebody that's trying to hijack my consciousness? And the dowsing is like 90% accurate.
When I think of dowsing, are they using tools?
Well, people think of dowsing when they think of searching for water, oil, and exploration. But people don't understand that dowsing can be also used for healing. Dowsing can also be used for tapping into your psychic abilities. And going back to the clear voice, I say the voice is not always a voice. It can be feelings. You could be going into a business and everything goes wrong. It's talking to you, don't go into that business. Or you go into a car accident. Things are not going smoothly. There's not an ebb and flow to your life. That's how they talk to you. So they may not talk to you through your voice, but they talk to you through your feelings and your frustrations and your anxiety. So you have to be really in tune with who you are. But I think also, and I haven't tried this, but hopefully I'm not in that situation, but the voice of God, if you have the power of dowsing, you can take and reverse that frequency and send it back to whoever sent it to you and give them a taste of their own medicine.
Okay. Yeah. That's it. Guys, this actually happened and was reported on national news. It's
Many are calling it a miracle. An 18-month-old baby girl survived 14 hours suspended upside down in her car seat in the Spanish Fork River. Tonight, we're learning more about the rescue and that mysterious voice that helped save her life.
Fox 13's Annie Cutler just spoke with one of baby Lily's rescuers. She joins us from the crash scene in Spanish Fork. Annie.
Yeah, hi, Hope and Bob. As you mentioned, I'm here at the scene of where this car flipped into the Spanish Fork River. And just behind me, you see that a small makeshift memorial has started with some candles and flowers and some balloons that have been placed here. Now, we spoke with one of the officers involved in the rescue, as you mentioned. He recalls what he saw and perhaps more importantly, what he heard before he realized baby Lily was in that car and still alive. Officer Tyler Beddoes was one of the first to arrive at the scene Saturday after police were called about a car that had crashed into the Spanish Fork River. The car was upside down in the water. At first, Beddoes and the other officers could see only a driver who was not alive. But then Beddoes says he and the 3 other officers heard someone shouting for help.
We heard a voice, a distinct voice. It wasn't thinking. We actually heard someone say, help me now, that type of stuff.
They jumped into action, racing against time to save whoever was still alive inside the car.
Something was there, and that pushed us harder. When we heard that voice, to us, it was somebody's alive in that car. Let's get in there and get them out. So anything we could do to get inside that car, we tried to do.
They were able to flip the car over, only to see Lily unconscious and strapped in her car seat.
I mean, miraculous.
Who or where the voice came from may always remain a mystery.
We all together said, yes, we heard that same voice. And so when we really talked about it, it was then that it kicked in. The mom was obviously deceased when the car was flipped over, and the baby was unconscious at the time. And so for us, it was just, processing, still processing what occurred and what happened.
Officer Beddoes says he's just happy to hear Lily is doing well.
But to know that she's doing well is just, I have kids of my own, and so just to know that it's just amazing. I can't really describe in words how you feel. It's all worth it.
3 officers, all at the same time, saw this car that had been flipped over the bridge and was upside down in the water, and they saw a body of the mother was crumpled up on the windshield, and so they knew she was dead. So they were in no hurry to do anything with that car because they could see from far away it's just a crumpled up body. So they weren't concerned. Then all 3 of them got the same voice at the same moment, said, help me now. And then they realized something else may be going on. They looked in the car and they saw the baby, the toddler, in there hanging from the seatbelt. So let me ask you guys, is this a ghost story?
No, it happens to everybody. We just don't remember it.
Why is it not a ghost story though? Wasn't that?
Oh, it's spirit talking.
Yeah, whose spirit?
It could be anyone. It could be the soul of the baby. It could be the soul of the mother. It could be the baby's higher self. It could be a guy.
Yeah.
Could be the baby's higher self.
Yeah, I believe it's not the mom. I believe it is the baby speaking in first person, saying, help me now. Because, like Smarty said in the back, because you're a multidimensional being. Even though you're just an infant at that moment, your higher selves and the other versions of you already exist. And so those can come back and help you now. Right, John? Yeah, that's what it's all about. That's why this isn't a ghost story, and thank goodness mainstream media didn't really get a hold of this. It was reported locally one time, and that was it. Otherwise, the globalists would have sent in their attack dogs, and they would have, attacked these 3 officers who all told the truth. And you know what happens to people who tell the truth about the paranormal? So that's why I ask, is this a ghost story? Why did the media, and the reason they didn't slant the story is because it just happened and they just got the information out there. Local news sometimes reports truth. We all know that because they are local. Who was the source? Yeah, these were the answers to what we just asked. I also had an NDE at 18 months. Just to give you an example, I was 18 months old and I got yellow fever when I went to Ecuador, South America, as a kid, and I did die during the night when I was sick, and I saw myself as an adult man going through a tunnel. So I'm just telling you, you have access to all the different versions of yourself, even if you're just a toddler. We've all been. Philip K. Dick had his experience with his ill son being cured by this source of the great voice, and the Save Them experience. Oh, this is about the comprehension problem. Here's the problem. The source of your great voice is so far above what we are. It's hard to describe. It's a cosmic reality that sometimes it doesn't quite remember what it's like to be a human running around getting stuff in the physical. It just barely remembers that. But it knows it wants to help you. So that's what leads to these short phrases that's trying to avoid misunderstanding, but all it does is create misunderstanding. Save them. Save them. That's it. Nothing more. And then you can think, well, save who? Well, what is he talking about? And that can lead to problems, but it's the nature of the situation where you have a much higher being communicating with a much lower being. There's no other way to say that. You've all been missing, presumed dead for 5.5 years.
If you'd seen us that afternoon, we looked like a typical American family returning home from vacation. My brother Ben and his twins, Olive and Cal. But what you couldn't see is that Cal's leukemia wasn't responding to treatment.
This flight is oversold. We are offering travel vouchers for any...
That's me. So Grace and Olive and my folks took the first flight home. Funny how one little decision can ruin your life, but also save it. Excuse me, what exactly is the problem?
The problem, ladies and gentlemen, is you've all been missing, presumed dead for 5.5 years.
I don't understand. You haven't aged a day. Where's Mom?
Your mom got sick.
You can get all the episodes free online. You can find them.
Your cell regeneration model?
It works.
We've been treating pediatric patients for 30 months. We pick up with the same regimen, right where we left off.
There's a new treatment protocol for pediatric cases. If we get a jump in the treatment, the odds are excellent.
Didn't expect you getting back to work this fast.
Yeah, a lot has changed since you've been gone.
Who is she?
It was 2 years before I even looked at another one.
Even before I got on that plane, I lost sight of your life. We're gonna fix that. I'm not going anywhere.
The universe just gave all of us a do-over.
Everything checks out. It's as if the plane never left the sky.
Do I have to say out loud that that's impossible?
I think we've taken impossible off the table.
Is your mind messing with you? Earlier today, I heard a voice in my head.
Keep it
to yourself, what do you think? The government just forgot about us?
Just maybe he came back to be saved, and I came back to save him. How'd you know I was here?
I just knew.
What is this? There were a lot of people on that plane. What makes us so special?
What's the probability it's just you and me?
No one can explain what happened to us. Some people called it impossible. Others called it a miracle. All I know is whatever force brought us all here had no interest in being investigated. This was just the beginning.
NBC on Monday nights. And every single person on that plane came back clairaudient. And voices are all connected to each other. So the Save Them experience, I thought it was in this clip, but the Save Them is they were a couple of them were directed to save them, and then that's all the voice said to them. And then they were directed to this area where there were a couple of guard dogs were fenced in, Dobermans, vicious Dobermans. And so the lady says, well, we must be here to save the dogs, but they're going to bite us when we break the fence open. And the guy said, well, that's what the voice is telling us to do. That's what we got to do. So they broke the fence open, they open it, and then the Dobermans come out, and they don't charge them, they just run away. They ran away. And then they're like, well, that was easy. And then they walk in a little further into the place, and they find that the guard dogs were guarding a storage bin. And then they hear something inside the storage bins. And then she breaks that chain open, and they find two girls who had been kidnapped by a serial killer. And he was using the dogs to keep people out of the area. And they figure out to save them was to save the girls that were locked in. Yeah. When I was a kid in New York City, that's my father with me as a small child. And my father had a friend named Harvey that he and Harvey would run around New York City dressed in sharp-skinned suits, pretending to be FBI agents. And my dad was a prison guard, so he had that phony baloney little badge that prison guards get. And so did his friend Harvey. And so they used to run around town and rouse people and bother people and do all kinds of shenanigans. But his friend Harvey was a drinker, a drunkard, and he would always tell us stories about his friend Harvey. And his friend Harvey, my dad was like 6'3", Harvey was like 6'5". He was even bigger than my dad, and he would get them into fights with people. He would go out drinking too much, drinking a hard whiskey and fighting people. My dad would describe to us, Harvey would fight people. He would stamp. He would get them to fight him and put the lead foot forward and then stamp on their feet with his size 15 shoes. And then he would just wail on them and destroy them. And these stories fascinated me when I was a kid. But when I would ask my dad to bring Harvey to our house, he would always say, no, Harvey's a really rough character. You guys don't want to ever see him. And then one day, my dad came home from one of his outings with Harvey, where they had gotten into a fight back in an alley with some guys, and one of the guys popped up on my dad with a 2x4 and smashed his beautiful, handsome face, as my family would refer to it, and it was he almost lost half his face. It was ruined. And they used elixirs. Ecuadorian people are very big on natural medicine. And they used elixirs all weekend to try to save his face. And it pretty much worked. But my dad was in a fever the whole weekend, and he said, never again with Harvey, never, ever again. And after that, he never spent any time with Harvey again. However, shortly after that time, there was an incident where we lived in an apartment and up on like the second or third floor. And there was an incident where a lady was being mugged right outside of our window, like a little ways away. And two youthful thugs were pulling on her handbag, and she was hanging on, and she was screaming bloody murder like they were murdering her. My dad comes and yells out the window, and then I saw my dad go down the stairs and race out there to where she was. I never saw anybody move so fast. He covered the distance, and then he starts hitting the two guys. And then I saw him, he smashed one guy, the other guy approaches him from the other side, and I see him wheel around and smash the guy's front foot with his foot, and then start boxing him out. And I got the message loud in my ear, not in my ear, in the back of my head, that he is the one. And I was like, what does that mean? And then, like often happens, I got it a second, and a third time. He is the one. And on the third one, as I'm watching my dad beat on the second guy, I realized that there is no Harvey. There never was a Harvey. My dad was Harvey. And that was later confirmed by my mom. So but it goes to sometimes how short and simple these messages are, and how you have to work to figure them out sometimes. Imagery, that's why the great voice also uses imagery and visions. And as we'll see later, even physical reality, it can at times push physical reality as well.
Then we should move the people to a nursing home under false names.
No. Paul's awakening gave us an insight into their catatonia. They were harmed in service of my theories. Now we may be close to a cure. I will not abandon them when there's still hope.
Then we need to find a way to keep you all safe. Find her. Find her. Find her. Hey.
Calling again. Find her?
You found Helen. Now it must be telling you to find the Major.
I don't think we're supposed to find anyone. I think I'm having someone else's calling.
What do you mean?
The voice in my head, it's not mine. What the hell is going on?
Let me see here. I think I'll have to skip this one in the interest of time. In 1979 in New York City, we had the worst snowstorm in like 100 years. It covered everything. And unfortunately, it was also the time when I decided I was having a terrible conflict with my stepmother, and I went walking out in that snow. I just went walking in general, and I didn't know where I was going, but I just had a pair of jeans and a light jacket on, and I just went walking until I was through the neighborhood, and there was nothing left. I was in a desolate area, and there was nothing there except mounds of snow and a prison. It looked like a prison or a public school in the near distance. And I finally collapsed in a mound of snow. I just collapsed. And I started feeling myself slip away. I was freezing to death. And suddenly I just hear, again, from the back of the head, I hear, "Get up." And I was like, why? And I just repeated again, the second and third time, "Get up." And when I wouldn't get up, I guess got this bunch of images, this vision of my stepmother back at home celebrating that I had died. And she said something about a no good rotten kid, the same argument we had earlier that day. And she was quite happy, and that kind of warmed up my insides, and I started moving and getting up. Anger helps. And it worked, and I was able to crawl out of there, and I would have otherwise died that day and got back to my dad's house. Now, later on, when I grew up, and this is taken from my book, my mom was was back in my neighborhood, she was lending out cash to people. She was lending out cash. She was like a bank, lending out cash to people, and I didn't like her doing this, and I told her so. I told her it was dangerous business to be in, especially some of the characters were unsavory that she would lend cash to, and this is when I was with my mom as a single mom, just the two of us living. Anyway, eventually my mom was murdered. She was killed, and the police labeled it as an accident. She was at her home, and she was pushed down some cement stairs, and she was killed. And the calling, the great voice, showed me the scene of what happened, and I saw exactly what happened. Except the person that perpetrated the deed was shown to me as a shadow, nothing but a shadow. So this is Death of the Muse here. There's the shadow in back.
When they let us go, they told us we weren't supposed to talk. But I know my rights. And now that I've spoken up, I think they're watching me. I'm telling you, I think the government is behind this. I mean, if I'm supposed to own my truth, don't you think they should too?
When my mom's funeral came out, I was told, do not go there. Do not go there. And the reason, I was shown images of the funeral, and I was shown that if I went to the funeral, I would immediately recognize the person who murdered my mom, that I would somehow know who it was. And so I was shown the funeral, except again, the person who perpetrated the deed was shown as a shadow to me. To me, it was shown as a shadow, just a shadow, like the shadow that just killed the lady in that last scene. And so I didn't go to the funeral, and that's the reason why. Because if I did, it would set me on a course of revenge that would interfere with my life path, the path that I was given. And that's the whole scene. I was shown the entire scene of how my mom was killed, and it's something that I've never pursued. But I did question, because you can submit questions to the Great Voice, as we'll see at the end of this workshop. And I questioned, what was the reason for all this knowledge that I couldn't do anything about? Why are you showing me all these things if there's nothing I can do about it? And the only answer I received was, all things work together for good. All things work together for good. Does anybody recognize where that phrase is from? It comes from Romans 8:8. And we know all things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. Are called. When I started working on the show Manifest, and they started putting me as designated staff writer to put the stuff together, the one thing they told me was, you're not allowed to use anything from religious or from the Bible, anything at all. So if you have anything, we're not going to use it. And then they turned around and they did this.
Welcome home. Ears burning much? You're the subject.
And the flight is called Flight 828. That's the whole center of the show. And they named it 828, Flight 828.
We know in our heart. You okay? Michaela?
Can I take this?
As long as you put it to good use. Looks like it rides here.
You saved those girls.
We saved those girls. How'd you know I was here?
just knew.
I just knew.
What is this? What is happening? How about this? There were a lot of people on that plane. Why you and me? What makes two head cases like us so special?
What's the probability it's just you and me?
And of course, it wasn't just the two of us. Ben and I didn't know any of these people yet. But soon we'd know them as well as we know ourselves. As for whatever force brought us all here, it had no interest in being investigated. And as for the group of us, this was just the beginning.
So they not only did they use the Bible verse, Romans 8:8, but they made it the basis for like the whole series, because it says all things work together for good for those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. And then they made it a calling. And then they took 828 and made it the number of the plane. That is the center of all this. I had an appointment with tragedy. These are my two young sons, 5 and 7, in Washington, D.C. We were riding on these giant escalators, and my older son was getting too far away from me. He was like 100 feet away on the escalator. And these things are gigantic. They're enormous. And my son was down from where I was, and I told him, hey, come on back. He didn't move. He was just standing with his back to me, with his hat on. And I said, come on back, you're too far away, come on back. And I just heard, I can't move. And something went off, and I just felt like something was wrong. And I jumped down to where he was. I jumped all the way down. I covered the distance, and he's squealing because his sneaker, we had just bought some indestructible shoes for him. Boy, they were indestructible. And it was caught in the teeth of the elevator, of the escalators. And his shoe was getting threshed into the escalator by the teeth. It was getting sucked in as we were getting closer to the bottom. And I just grabbed it, and I started just pulling on the shoe to get it out. I figured, just get in the right position and just exert some energy and pull it, tear it free. And I did that, and I just kept pulling and pulling. And first, I got an image of an ant on a giant anthill, and with all these pulleys and levers, and I got the image of like 7,000 horsepower, something like that. And I couldn't get it loose. I heard guitar strings going off in my lower back and snapping loose, and I couldn't get the thing out. And now my boys, the toes were already in, and half the shoe was going into the bottom of the thing as we were approaching, and my boy is just screaming in my ear, and I was in a panic loop where I just kept on repeating the same action, and then suddenly I got the message, undo the laces. I just heard, and my hands moved so fast, I don't remember moving them. I just saw a blur, and they undid the laces and pulled his foot out. The sock was, just as the sock is getting torn off his foot, and the whole shoe just goes in, gets sucked in, and the whole shoe disappeared in there. And I just pulled out his big, beautiful foot, and it was unblemished. There was not a scratch on it. It was pale like the rest of his body. He was completely pale, but his foot was not damaged. I couldn't believe it. And I just carried him away from the escalators, and we just went into a corner and we're just giving prayers of thanks for him being okay, because that was a harrowing experience.
John, are you getting clear voice? Are you getting thoughts, or is it coming differently?
It comes both ways. It comes from...
So all these experiences are getting different.
Yeah, we do get it in different ways, and sometimes I get it in a still small voice, where it's this voice that's low and far away, and you got to kind of strain to hear it, but it is there, and you
Recognize whether it's yours or someone else's.
It's always mine, but not mine. Like I'm explaining here, it's your voice, but it's not from you. It's a version of you that is much more commanding.
I think sometimes it could be other entities' voices.
It could be.
I recognize the voice.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, it could be. Most common clear hearing experiences, some of which are in the series manifest they put down. One is the precious package experience, where there's a little kid or a toddler running down the road. Somehow they got out of their house or they got away from their parents, and they're running on a road or a highway, and then a van or a car will get a message, stop. They'll just hear it in their head, stop. And they don't know why. And then they just hit their brakes, and they suddenly see this little figure scurrying from beneath their van or their car, and it's just this little kid, little toddler, and then they try to return the kid to their home or to wherever it came from. Another, throw it down, great black voice. There are many common experiences. And the source of the great voice, what you were talking about. I've spoken with Whitley Strieber. Many of you he has many experiences of alien visitors talking to him, and talking to him very like a normal thing. And it's just something he hears in his head. Yeah, something he hears in his head, and that's not him. That's another entity that's speaking to him. So yeah, different people have different types of voices. Yes, sir.
I mean, you've got a particular gift. I mean, and a lot of people can have it. There must be a way to cultivate it. So I always felt like I was a little bit too logical, like brain and everything. And my wife's a medium, that comes easily to her.
Yeah.
I took the course. I actually was able to do it. I haven't done anything with it. It's similar. You're getting those messages.
Right. And the way to cultivate it in this sense is to do things like a 7-day exercise that we're going to go through at the end of this, or meditation exercises, awakening exercises as well. And that's how, and then listening for the great voice to come, and it will come to you. Because the great source revealed, in these cases, the source of the great voice is you. I might as well tell you guys this real quick. I had an experience, it's something, actually, Joe Pepitone just mentioned something very similar to this. I had a person that I was developing as an informant, so I had to visit them on a regular basis. It was this guy named Kartos, and he was supposedly a member of the community who was going to give information on terrorist community. And he was a really nice guy. He was wonderful. He was a very friendly, and this is more or less what he looked like here from the sketch artist. And I had to do international checks on him, and that takes a lot longer than regular checks. And so I put those in, and then I showed up to his business. He had like a storefront that didn't seem to do any business. All the business he did in the back on his cell phone. That seemed like that was it, because it was just a bunch of desks with chairs at them, and there was not much else going on. But there was one desk it looked like he actually used for stuff. So one day I went in there, and I was rifling through the desk. And there was a wall mirror behind me, too, so I was watching that as well. And while he was in the back, I rifled through to try, because I'm trying to find out information about Cartos. And I found pictures of, like, politicians with Cartos. I found framed pictures of him. And I also found a bunch of kirpaks, also called kirpans, which is curved daggers, ceremonial daggers. Sometimes I have jewels on the hilt, and they're very fancy. But one of the daggers actually had a dried substance all along the blade that was consistent with dried blood. And I looked at that, and I was like, okay, we got to check that out later. And then I heard him coming, so I put everything back, and I just closed the drawers real fast. And he's like, hey, my friend, come. And I would drink this thick Turkish coffee with him. It was bad. Really bad. And we would discuss politics and stuff. And so then that was that visit. And then the following week, I came back to his storefront. And I opened up the double doors to his storefront. And I was going to go in. And suddenly I hear a big wave from the back that just says, do not go in there. Do not go in there. And my legs froze up. So I'm holding the doors open. I'm trying to move forward, and I couldn't. And again, I heard, do not go in there. Again, it's the second and the third time. And I'm trying to move in there. And then Cardos pops up over at the desk that I had rifled through, and he's back there, and he's screaming at me, come on in, my friend, come. I just got to talk to you. I got to talk to you. I got to talk to you. I got to show you this picture I took with these famous politicians. You've never seen this before. And you got to see this. You got to see this. And I couldn't move forward. I was trying to, and I just couldn't. And I just yelled back at him, Cardos, I don't think I can come in today. I'm just coming by to tell you that I can't. And as he's standing up there, I see this, the one knife that had dried blood, he's holding it because the wall was a mirror. So I could see it's holding it in the small of his back. And he's just holding it there as he's screaming for me to come in. He said, no, my friend, you have to come in. You have to see this stuff I have for you. You have to come in. And I told him, I said, as I'm still in the doorway there, frozen, I just told him, I kept telling him, Cardos, I just came by to tell you I have to leave today, but I'll see you next week. I can't make this appointment. I can't. I'm sorry. And I pushed back, and my legs unlocked. Now I could move them. I thought I was having a stroke, but as soon as I pushed back, my legs unlocked, and I was able to move. And so I leaned in again and just said, Cardos, I'm leaving. Sorry. And he squirmed at the top of his lungs. No, 1 minute. That's all I need. 1 minute is all I need. And that's the last thing I heard as I shut it. And next week, the following week, of course, the checks came back on him from overseas. And we found out that according to all of his aliases, one of his aliases came back to a terrorist whose specialty was killing Soviet policemen with a knife. That's what he was, and he was wanted. He was wanted internationally by Interpol and other places as well. And of course, by that time, his office was cleaned out and he was gone. And it was sanitized. I mean, completely sanitized. So, 3 elements of the great voice. Here's what it is. You just have to be a human with normal chakras, which you are, okay? Everyone here is. Second, you have to have some sort of crisis of some sort. And it can be personal to you. You know, something that's a crisis to you may not be a crisis to someone else. And 3, you need emotional outreach, some strong emotional outreach. You have to know the law. Know the law. After establishing contact through elements, the great voice can establish a permanent presence where the still small voice can always be reaching out to you. Page 156 to 157. In accordance with cosmic law, it has to happen this way. Your superconscious voice will respond to your faith and your emotional need by speaking to you and rendering assistance that will protect, increase, and magnify you. Every human being is capable of connecting to the superconscious voice embedded within them. Clear hearing skills. The great voice is you. You can expand your relationship to the great voice. I received downloads from the great voice, pages that start on page 211. Unsolvable conundrums can be resolved by the great voice. You can get support and direction. 10 downloads from page 213 to page 256. And that is some crazy stuff. If you want to skip ahead, skip ahead to that part. This is the Clear Hearers book. The gentleman right there, the young man there behind you has it. Oh, other people have it too. Okay. So the downloads start on page 211. The downloads are the most common 10 questions that we would ask of God. The great voice entity is the prime soul. The prime soul has to reach out to many derivative souls, okay? And yet every derivative soul is the prime soul as well, you see? So you've got competition for attention, let's call it that. That's why your emotion is the factor that gets through. That's what activates the great voice, the help from the great voice. But I'll tell you something else. Here's something that I'll tell you. Manifest is not just a list of passengers on the plane. Manifest is also a verb. That means you can use a greater power to create results that you want. And that's what we're going to do right here in a moment. Contacting your great voice. You can use methods like meditations, like what we did in the Unabomber case. You can use lucid dreaming as a bedtime seal. Or you can also use waking contemplation exercises. Waking contemplation exercise can use water, silence, candles, crystal. 7-day awareness exercise is as simple as a meditation that starts the 7 days, where you seal your desires, your goals, what you want, and you upload that to the great voice. And then at the end of the 7 days, during this time, you will get a result from the great voice. You will sit, you will listen, and you will get some result. And at the end of the 7 days, you will write down your results. So, this is the application. This is the instruction. 7-day awareness exercise. Please, as we write this up, please keep the sheet confidential. There's many reasons for that, but yeah, keep it confidential to yourself. You can even memorize it and burn it if you don't want to keep it for the end of the 7 days, because the important thing is the upload. That's the crucial thing. Okay? Keep your awareness open for 7 days and let your superconsciousness shape the next 7 days. Act and absorb the great voice response. This is based on methods page 188 to 198, methods for access. This is the actual sheet. Oh, could someone, let me see. I don't know how many we have in here. Could someone help me pass these around? I want to keep one because I want to do it too. I did this one time, and I can't tell you, my results were insane. Absolutely insane. Again, I recommend you keep this confidential, even from your besties. I know some of you are here with your besties, but there's all kinds of reasons to do that. And Some of it has to do with like electromagnetic interference, and there's like cosmic reasons why it's good to keep it confidential. So the first space, number 1, says crisis or extreme need. I need, I require, what's another word for saying that? I demand, I will get, I am receiving.
You're supposed to write that down?
Yes. And then write what is your extreme need. But it has to be something you have a real deep emotional connection to. Otherwise,
Are you talking about physical or any?
yeah, anything. As long as you feel it, you feel the deep connection to this need, whatever it is. It doesn't matter if it's physical or spiritual. And then on number 2, you put the emotion that is connected to that need. What is the emotion? And let yourself feel that emotion.
Okay, repeat that again.
And then number 2 is you put down the emotion that is connected to that need. What is that emotion? It can be anything, and it's what you feel. And then the third, you leave blank. You leave blank because this will be the answer that you get to yourself, from yourself. For direction, for saying yes or no, anything, any feedback from the great voice, the still small voice that will come to you. So then you write down those first 2, and then we just take a moment of silence to upload it to the superconsciousness. So let me read my thing to myself one more time. What my need is, and the emotion I have, and then I'm going to take a moment of silence to upload it. If you could do that with me. All right. I think that's good. Now, this is the beginning of the 7 days of the 7-day awareness exercise with this. So you can take this sheet home. You can burn it if you'd like, but you will keep your awareness open during these 7 days to receive that answer that you have that space on number 3. And there you will put whatever feedback you get from the great voice. And then at the end of the 7 days, you will look for your answer and for what you will receive. And that's it. Yes, you do all these. Yes, you can go home and do a meditation again, just like we did a more expanded one, to continue to upload that query, that request to the universe, and you can do that meditation with a burning of the document, if you like. And then at the end of the 7 days, you should do another meditation to receive that answer, if you haven't received it already during the 7 days.
One intention per 7 days, or would you have overlapping or dual intentions?
I would do this exercise is for one thing, the thing that we wrote on the sheet. So I would keep to that for these 7 days until the end, and you finish it with a meditation at the end again, like I said. But I'm going to burn mine at home with a meditation, because that's just how I do. That's just what I like to do. And then at the end of the 7 days, I will continue a meditation to get my result at that. So that's what I have for you guys today. And I will be here and open to any other questions. Oh, we still have 20 minutes if you like.
With the show, The Manifest, I was wondering about the Malaysian Airlines, and are they going to find out answers in 5 years in the future? That's one thought. Well, I just thought of that's a mystery, and that watching that made me think of it. And also with you talking about your clear hearing, I was wondering when you'd bring up remote viewing, and when you mentioned your mom's funeral, that seemed like
it was like remote viewing, right? Yeah, I'll tell you.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. About the show Manifest, I'm not supposed to say what I think is going to happen in the future. As a matter of fact, just telling you that the word manifest is now going to mean something else in the near future, that I was probably not supposed to tell you that. But they are going to propose possible sources for the great voice in the near future. And it's going to be lots of different possibilities, like what we did here, where there's going to be parts where it'll be possibly alien visitors at one point, and then another time it's going to be possibly voice of God technology from the government, but they'll all kind of fall through as the time goes on, and then they'll go to other things. So that's how that's going to go. But yes, and also on what you said about remote viewing, yeah, a lot of this and a lot of these experiences are very similar to remote viewing and seeing other possibilities, even possibilities that are only possible and that didn't really happen. So yeah, that does happen a lot too. One of the experiences that I skipped during the presentation, in the interest of time, was the experience of the Blessed Virgin, the vision of the Blessed Virgin, and that's very much like remote viewing that you might recognize. When I was in college, I was at a university where everybody was in love with this one girl who was a very cute little redhead, who we called her Teresa the Blessed Virgin, okay? Because she was very strict. She was a pre-med student. She was very strict about her studies, but she was also a beautiful girl. And like me and all my friends were all in love with her. But she wouldn't give us the time of day, of course. And so what happened was, one day we were out at a pub, at the school pub, and she's the most conservatively dressed one in that picture. But it was her birthday, and she was drinking. She was drinking with her friends. So she was plastered. And I came in with my friends, and she saw me from across the room, and she walked up to me, gave me a big wet kiss on the lips. And I was amazed. I was amazed because she never really gave me the time of day at all, even though I was infatuated with her. And I was taken by surprise. And then she took me by the hand, and she told her friends that I would be walking her home across campus. She was just on the other side of the campus. And I would be walking her home across campus. And I was like, I couldn't believe my luck. I was like, holy crap, this is awesome. And I was walking with her, and then I got the big wave from the back that said, do not go with her. And I was like, what? And it just came back again. Do not go with her. And I just got the big, and I was like, okay, this one I was ignoring for sure. And I just kept going with her. But, I would have gone out that door with her. But the third time it came, it was like remote viewing. That's why you reminded me of this. Because it lifted me out of the body. I was lifted out of the body and I was taken somewhere across campus. Time was frozen in the physical, which I found out later, but time was frozen in the physical, but I lifted up and I was taken across campus into something that I didn't know at the time, but it was something that could be happening. And I went to a scene where there was a lecture hall that was close to where we would have been walking, and it had been opened. And I looked in there, and in there was me. It was me in the physical, was there, and Teresa, the Blessed Virgin, was across in another place, and she was crying, and campus security was there, and her friends were there, and they were huddling around her, and she was crying her eyes out, and I was in handcuffs. And I was begging Teresa, to the Blessed Virgin, to tell everyone what really happened, and she just wouldn't look at me, and she was just crying and crying, and I felt a heaviness, like a tremendous heaviness in my physical body, and I saw a heaviness, and I could feel the thoughts from my physical version of, oh my God, I'm going to have to tell my mom I'm kicked out of college. Oh my God, I'm going to lose my scholarship. Like, I felt all these heavy thoughts from this person that was being led away in cuffs. And the real police were now coming as well. I could see the lights from them, and they were coming. And then I came back into the physical, and I was right there in the pub being led by Teresa, the Blessed Virgin, and I just broke away from her hand, and I pulled her instead back to her friends. And I pulled her back over to her friends after this experience. And I put her back with her friends, and I said, I'm sorry, I am not feeling well at all. Something's wrong with me. I'm not feeling well. You guys are gonna have to walk her home, whatever. And Teresa was perplexed. The Blessed Virgin was perplexed because she knew I was crazy about her. And I just left her with her friends, and I marched right out of that pub, and I went home it was a crazy experience. So that's kind of like remote viewing, right? Sort of. Yeah. Oh, this was definitely not on purpose. This was against my will.
That was like a possible timeline.
Yes. Yes, it was like a possible. Young man?
You mentioned these three elements. You got the normal chakras, the crisis period.
Yes.
Strong emotional outreach.
Yes.
And that, I went to Dimension of Disclosure, that mass meditation where I mentioned that.
Oh, okay.
One thing I really was amazed by was how many people that were, what we call woke, had some kind of crisis experience in their lives.
Yeah.
I mean, big turning point. You were talking about an NDE, and I've heard that that's like a jump start.
Yeah. NDE is a jump start to all of these experiences. He's talking about the elements of being a clear hearer, the three. Yeah, what else?
Well, I mean, it's a strong emotional outreach. Is that what the word was, outreach?
Yes. Strong emotional outreach is an element, yeah.
What does that involve?
That just involves, I probably should jump back to this. It involves, the strong emotional outreach is needed because we're derivative souls, so to speak, that are functioning off prime soul, and we are competing for attention with parallel versions of ourselves. And whoever has the squeakiest wheel gets the grease. And this strong emotional outreach is how you connect and get the attention from the prime soul, the higher self, the great version of yourself that is up there waiting to help you.